And their influence convinced Clive to renounce atheism. It wasn't until age 33 that he did so, and he confessed his faith in Jesus and reconnected with the church of his childhood. If you've heard of Clive, you probably didn't know that was his name. We tend to refer to him as C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis was surprised himself at his conversion to Christianity and became one of the foremost Christian apologists of the last century and author of some familiar literary works. Who would surprise you the most these days? Try not to get yourself in trouble with your answers. Who would surprise you the most with their conversion to Christianity?
I think I've heard Bob.
Next.
Al Sharpton.
Next.
Didn't Madeline O'Hara's youngest son convert to Christianity? I know one of her children was with
yes.
her, but I think her youngest child
I believe so.
converted.
Pretty much anybody out in Hollywood.
Anybody in Hollywood?
To bring it home closer, I think people I know that's kind of like that you're a real smart brain type person that's always studying, and they're totally against Christ. I think if they turn around, then to me they've really researched it.
If some of these brainy people that Tara has described, or some of these Hollywood people that Vicki has described, were to make this conversion, would you be skeptical or believing of their conversion?
You have to learn first. You'd have to show me something.
Okay. I think most of us probably would be, Steve.
I got one. It'd be myself. If you'd have asked me when I was, till I was 30, Christ was something that was there, I'd have said, no way. Wasn't any part of my life at all. Couldn't tell you that I had ever been in a church. As a kid, I'd probably been in a church, but wasn't part of my life at all.
He simply was not a factor,
Not a factor.
and then he became one. Awesome, thank you for sharing that. Well, long before C.S. Lewis converted, long before Steve King converted, that part was missing from my notes, Saul of Tarsus shocked the world in the same way that C.S. Lewis did. Saul of Tarsus had a life-changing encounter with the risen Christ. And there was a significant change that took place in his life that day. See, he was a persecutor of the early church. When we first are introduced to him in chapter 8, verse 1, when Luke tells us that Saul was there watching when Stephen was put to death. Did Saul order the death? I'm not sure, but it's likely that he did, because that was his job. See, he was a persecutor of Christians, and he was actually traveling today to go to a city to persecute, capture, bring back for trial, and probably execute the followers of the Lord Jesus Christ when something happened. This is hard for us to picture in our minds who Paul was, who Saul was, because we're not really familiar with examples of people that are as ruthless as he was, other than what we see in the news from terrorists and if you think of what's happened with ISIS's intentional persecution of believers, honestly, that would be similar to who Saul was. It's been foreign to us until recent days. It's not quite as foreign now, but it's still foreign in terms of it happening here at home. And so Saul was that kind of persecutor of Christians. And he's on his way to Damascus to continue. When God gets a hold of it, we're going to pick up the story in chapter 9. We may as well start at the beginning of the chapter. Meanwhile, Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and requested letters from him to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found any who belonged to the way, either men or women, he might bring them as prisoners to Jerusalem. So, what's the context here? In these first couple of verses, he sets the stage for the story. Where's he going? He's going to Damascus for what purpose? To get the Christians on whose authority?
High priest.
The authority of the high priests. So the religious leaders. As he traveled and was nearing Damascus, a light from heaven suddenly flashed around him. Falling to the ground, he heard a voice saying to him, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" Now let's pause there. Who was he persecuting?
Christians.
He went persecuting Christians. The question that's posed to him is, why are you persecuting Jesus? Jesus makes the connection that when his people are persecuted, he is persecuted. Picking back up in verse 5, "Who are you, Lord?" he said. "I am Jesus, the one you are persecuting," he replied. "But get up and go into the city, and you'll be told what you must do." Verse 5, Jesus answered his question, "I am Jesus." Why was it important right at this moment for Jesus to go ahead and answer that question that Saul had asked?
Saul did not believe that Jesus had been physically bodily raised from the resurrection. He thought that was just a lie that was in the church. He didn't think he was a lie. So Jesus had identified himself by voice. Obviously, he's a liar.
Paul has been absolutely convinced that Jesus is dead. And he's basing his persecution on that belief, isn't he? Jesus kind of turns that upside down when he says, "I am," who? Jesus. "I am the one that you thought was dead." Why else do you think it's significant that he states who he is right at this point?
Well, in the Old Testament, any voice like that would have come from God. So I think, I don't want to get into the whole Trinity thing, but I think it was just a clarification of who it was.
Okay.
That this wasn't an Old Testament voice from God. I mean, he was clarifying that this was Jesus.
Hmm? He knows something is up.